Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, the higher education budget for today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started on our two presentations. Well, Jill was going to be here, and I was going to see if anyone had any questions about allotments, and she was going to answer. I just saw her minutes ago, and I said, okay, I'll see if anyone has any questions, and then she can explain. So if she comes in, she may or may not. At that point, or maybe at the end, we'll see if anyone has any questions about what are allotments and how does it work. We did get some information. Did everyone get that sent to you? Yeah, okay. Okay, just, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay, any other housekeeping things before we jump in? Okay, the glossary.
Allotments are gone.
Thank you for the glossary. Yeah. Okay, any other? Welcome, Representative Nguyen. It's the first time we've gotten to see you in person, so we're glad you're here. Okay. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and begin the budget hearing on the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. First, we're going to get the budget analysis, and then we will hear from David Fry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Martin DeBoer. I am a fiscal analyst with KLRD, and the executive director of the agency of BSRB is here. David Fy is with us. He's sitting behind me to my right. If you look at your budget analysis, page 1 has a general table at the very top. We'll have an overview of the agency there. The agency does regulate multiple different professions, including psychologists, social workers, and counselors, addiction counselors, and a few others. The next few pages are just a general overview of the agency. Page 5 does list some of the agency's fees. This is a fee-funded agency, so they do not receive any SGF. It is also a biennial agency, which means that they do have an FY23 approved budget. So last year, during appropriations hearings, the legislature did approve a fiscal year 2023 budget.
And Martin, could I just 1 second, could I let everyone just look at kind of pages 1 through 4? Y'all just take a few seconds to look through, because I feel like, we jumped to the more meat of it, but I don't want you to have a chance to look through, see if you have any questions. We're more colorful this year. Okay, Representative Riley. Yes.
Madam Chair, my question is, and we're going to see this on other budget hearings that we got coming up. So could you just make sure that you explain, and this board is very small, but what is happening here with the 0.9% and 0.7% of the all funds? Page 1, top of the page 1. And just to explain that of comparison to all fees, that they're running on all fees, that they supposedly have a very small amount of.
During appropriations hearings, the legislature did approve a fiscal year 2023 budget.
And Martin, could I just 1 second, could I let everyone just look at kind of pages 1 through 4? Y'all just take a few seconds to look through, because I feel like, we jumped to the more meat of it, but I don't want you to have a chance to look through, see if you have any questions. We're more colorful this year. Okay, Representative Riley. Yes.
Madam Chair, my question is, and we're going to see this on other budget hearings that we got coming up. So could you just make sure that you explain, and this board is very small, but what is happening here with the 0.9% and 0.7% of the all funds? Page 1, top of the page 1. And just to explain that of comparison to all fees, I mean, that they're running on all fees, that they supposedly have a very small amount of all funds. And I think part of that is to, make sure that everyone knows that 10% of their fee funds is swept out from under this too. So just a little explanation on that.
Sure, Madam Chair and committee. So if you're looking on page 1 at the top table there, we break it down with operating expenditures, the capital improvements, percentages. This agency does not have any capital improvements, so you won't see anything there. Those are any buildings or construction that the agency commits. So the first column down is the actual FY21 expenditures. These are the actual expenditures that the agency had incurred in fiscal year 2021. At the bottom, you'll see a percentage. The percentage from FY21, it compares to FY2020, which is not listed here. So that's where you see they had a 0.9% increase in their all funds. So all funds are any funds that are not SGF. That includes federal funds, any fee funds, or any other forms of revenue that the agency brings in. And then the FTE positions there at the bottom, that's how many FTE positions that the agency in FY21 actually had filled. So sometimes you might see that number a little bit lower than what's in FY22 or 23 with other agencies, because if they had vacant positions or they haven't filled all the positions, FY21 might seem lower when you're looking at the chart. So in this budget analysis, we're covering FY 2022 and FY 2023. So FY 22 already had an approved budget. We are now looking at, okay, does the agency need to supplement this budget in any way, or are there any changes to the FY 22 budget that need to be made? And then for fiscal year 23, for most agencies, this is a brand new request. It's the first time that they are requesting any funds. In this instance, with this agency and some of the smaller agencies, they are biennial agencies, which means that they have approved budgets for 2 years. So fiscal year 2022 and 23. And this is one of those agencies where they do have an approved budget for fiscal year 2023. Is there anything else?
Representative Riley.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think you said that the 9.0 FTE and the 9.5 FTE, those are actual or those are budgeted? Because do they actually have 9 people, or are they budgeted for 9 people?
The actual number should be the actual number that they had. The rest are the budgeted numbers.
So 2021 is over, and so that was the actual number, if I hear you correctly. What actual FY 2021, that's done, and so those are the actual numbers.
That's how many
In all
FTEs
cases.
they had. Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then, okay, Representative Fairchild, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was just in regards to the 2022 budget. Has the agency request and the governor request? My question was just the actual amount that the legislature allocated in the budget. Is that the same number as the 981,995 that the governor requested and that the agency requested?
That is correct. As we go through the budget, we will touch on each budget year, FY22 and 23, and the way that we have it laid out. As I go through this, you'll see what the legislature approved, and then we make any adjustments based on that approved number. So if there were no adjustments made, then they are requesting their approved amount. So we haven't quite gotten to the budget requests yet. I'm just going to give them a little bit of overview on the first few pages here. So as we go through, if you have any further questions, I'll be more than happy to stand for those.
That makes sense. I think it'll become more clear when he gets into the details. Okay. Any other questions on those first few pages? Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with that being said, I would like to start on page 7. So this is where you'll see the fiscal year 2022 analysis of the agency's budget. At the top of the page, you'll see a similar breakdown. there you will see in the top, you'll see legislature approved. You'll see any of the agency's estimates, revised estimates made to that approved, and then you'll see any of the changes made by the governor. Starting right below the box, you'll see that there were no changes made to the legislative approved by the legislature. So the agency has a request for a revised estimate of $981,995, all from special revenue funds for FY 2022. And this is the same as the approved amount. There is a little bit of reallocation within the budget there of where they spend the money, but there is no increase in their budget, so they are requesting the approved amount.
So just a quick question. So that's the exact number we would have seen last year when we were going through this process, when it was fiscal year 2022. We would have seen.
That is a number that the legislature approved.
Okay. And probably that we approved in this committee too. I'm thinking, I don't remember that we made any changes in that. But okay, I'm just wanting everyone to make sure they understand. Okay, thank you. Yes, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 981, 995, does that represent 100% of all revenues that were received through the sale of fee or through license and whatever monies that they bring in, less than 10%?
So just to clarify, when we discussed the budget, we are talking about the expenditures.
Okay.
So we are approving expenditures for the agency. So we don't discuss the revenues in our budget analysis. It's just how much is the agency going to spend in order to operate and accomplish their goals.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So for the agency, there are no changes. They do have an estimate of 9.5 FTEs. This is the same as the approved number. And at the very bottom of the page, you have a governor's recommendation, and the governor concurs with the agency's request. I would like to touch on that 9.5 real quick. That is, on the front page, you saw from 9 to 9.5. That 0.5 is in response to House Bill 2066 that was passed relating to licensure by military people coming to Kansas. And this was approved last year for fiscal year 2022. So with that, I'll stand for any questions on 22.
Okay, are there any questions on fiscal year 2022? Okay, we can continue.
Thank you. If you'll turn to page 9, you'll have the very similar page. This one will be fiscal year 2023. At the top, you'll have a breakdown again with the legislative approved because it is biennial, the agency request, and then the governor's recommendation. There were no changes to the legislative approved, so the agency is requesting a revised estimate of $988,412, all from special revenue funds. And this is an increase of $20,350, or 2.1% above the FY23 amount. This increase is due to, again, HB 2066. They needed that 0.5 FTE position and the funding for the position. When the appropriations bill was put together last year, that was not included in the agency's FY23 appropriation. So they're just asking to continue that appropriation, that FTE position and the funding for that position that they had in 22. At the bottom of the page, the governor concurs with the agency's FY23 revised estimate and makes no changes. And I'll stand for questions on 23.
Okay, any questions? 2023? Yes, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so the amount approved for the 2021 by the 2021 legislature is $968,000. So that was for the 2022 year then?
Madam Chair, Committee, that was for FY23. So the 21 legislature approved a future budget of 23 because this is a biennial agency. Yes.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you for answering our questions. And I just want to say, it really is my goal this year that our committee understands the budget process more every time we go through it. So I appreciate all the questions, and thank you for being patient to answer all of our questions. And I guess we have one more, Representative Riley.
So how would we have known that that was a biannual committee comparison to any of the other ones we were looking at? Is that noted someplace that we would keep track of that?
By statute, they're listed by statute, but yeah. And as it relates to seeing it directly on this, I don't believe that we indicated directly. We don't indicate it directly unless you're actually looking at the FY23, and then you'll see that it's based off the approved instead of the revised estimate. So if the agency is not a biennial for FY23 in that top chart, instead of seeing that number saying, the legislative approved, you will see what the agency's revised estimate was from the FY22, and that'll be the starting point where we work on the budget.
And correct me if I'm wrong, does it have to do with the fact that it's fee funded, that it's a biennial?
Not necessarily.
Okay. I was thinking there was a relationship there. Okay. Shirley, are you thinking? You look like you were thinking. No, okay. Okay, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one more question to try to understand this better. You know, since it's a 2-year cycle and we already budgeted for 2 years, like, are we now just going to go back and we're just looking at whether we're going to make any changes to what we already passed last year? Is that what we're basically doing?
That is correct. So this will be a supplemental bill for FY23.
Okay, super helpful. Okay, what else do you have for us?
I believe that is all. The remaining part of the budget analysis is a little bit of breakdown of their sub-programs. It kind of gives you a little bit of idea of how they operate within the agency. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, so you all can see there's basically two kinds of programs, the investigation and then the licensing. And we also heard about that when we were talking about performance-based budgeting last week, or whenever it was. Okay, and this is a little bit more information about that. Any other questions? Any other questions at all before we have Mr. Fry come up? Okay, Representative Riley.
I just would like the committee to note page 13, the graph there of, while you mentioned it, Madam Chair, about in dollars and amount of investigation and discipline expenditures since 2019 has gone from 0 on up to that new figure. Just wanted to bring that to.
Yep. Martin, how would you explain that?
Most definitely. There is a staff note right below that. The agency didn't really have an effective way to split the expenditures between the two because they technically have one main program and the funding all comes out of the same pot. So what the agency has done is they've tried to more accurately reflect the way that they expend the money within the two. So the executive director here can speak more to it, but they're really trying to be a little bit more transparent about how they spend their money.
Okay, super. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, now, Mr. Fry, if you would come on up and go ahead and start. And if it's okay with you, if we have questions as we go, we'll just do it that way.
That sounds perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
If I'm speaking too loudly, just let me know. So, my name is David Fy. I'm the executive director for the key.
Fy, not Fry. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Fy. I'm the executive director of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. And as Martin mentioned, our board is a composite board. We oversee 7 distinct professions, all in the area of mental health or addictions and substance use disorder professions. We have currently about 14,300 individuals who have a license under our board. And as was discussed previously, we are a fee-funded agency, so we do not receive any money from the state general fund, nor any federal funds. And as one of the committee members mentioned earlier, by statute, we do contribute 10% of our revenue to the state general fund. So we collect licensure revenue to fund our expenditures. And then, just for example, at the end of last year, fiscal year 2021, we contributed a little over $78,000 to the state general fund as that statutory requirement. We do have 9 members of our staff. In general, all of those positions are filled every year. We did have one employee who resigned in the late fall, and we had some difficulty filling that position, but we went ahead and hired another employee, so we are fully staffed for those 9 positions. As was mentioned also, we did receive authority to have a part-time position due to the passage of House Bill 2066. We have had difficulty hiring staff members, but we are still seeking to fill that position. One interesting thing about fee-funded agencies, so if we don't spend money within the fee fund, it does not go anywhere. It just remains in the fee fund and it's available to be spent in future years. So that is how that funding is currently working, but I'm optimistic we'll be able to find someone to fill that position sometime in the near future. In terms of the expenditures for our agency in fiscal year 2022, Martin did a great job of explaining that. We did request the same amount that your committee approved last year. There was one modification from the time that your committee heard our budget, and that had to do with the passage of 2066. So that funding for the part-time position was added after your committee had made recommendations. And then that was added during the omnibus period. And when we submitted that request for that position, we submitted it for 2022 and 2023 and continuing thereafter. It was more of a technical issue to add that funding back into our 2023 revised budget estimate. So that's why that funding appears there as well. One thing I think is important to clarify too, when you look at the front page of the budget analysis, you see actual expenditures in fiscal year 2021, and then you see planned expenditures in fiscal year 22 and 23. And as you might see, that appears to be quite a bit of an increase from 2021 to 2022. One item that may not appear in this budget document is that last year the Budget Committee approved a budget for fiscal year 2021 of $959,000. So it's very similar to what we requested in 2022 and 2023. The reason the actual expenditures are lower has to do with a number of different factors. This last year was a very unusual year because of the pandemic. We were not able to have in-person meetings, so normal expenses we would have for in-person meetings, board member reimbursement for mileage and travel and things like that, those didn't appear in the budget because we couldn't spend that funding. Additionally, we have money budgeted for legal expenses should we have cases that are appealed to a higher level where we need contract services from the Office of Administrative Hearings, or even at a higher level, and those are very costly. So we need that funding to be in our budget in case we need to spend it. But if we don't need to spend it, we don't want to just spend money without being responsible. So we really had a savings of about $100,000 for several different factors, and that accounts for the majority of the difference between actual expenditures in 21 versus our planned expenditures in 22 and 23. Aside from what I already discussed, in fiscal year 2023, there is a little bit of an increase between the approved budget for 2022 and then our revised estimate for 2023, and that just has to do with, like I mentioned earlier, returning to normal in terms of those in-state travel reimbursements for board members returning to meetings in person. And also, we have some furniture that needs to be replaced. We've been postponing those purchases for quite a while, and we hope to actually replace some of that furniture in the coming years. And then additionally, there was a bill that passed the 2021 legislature to add licensed psychology under a multi-state compact called SIPAC. And that SIPAC compact, there is an assessment of $10 per individual who practices under that in Kansas, and that assessment is charged to the state of Kansas. So we will have to pay that money to the SIPAC Commission, and so our budget will increase a little bit by having to pay the cost of that assessment to the state of Kansas.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question, but before that question, just out of curiosity, about how many of those $10 extra, the reciprocal licenses, will you have to pay? Do you know?
So our licensed psychologists have a 2-year license fee or license period. They're not automatically members of SIPAC. You have to apply to the SIPAC Commission to be able to practice under SIPAC. So we estimate the impact within the first essentially year of SIPAC is probably going to be about $2,000. If it's less, we just won't spend that money on paying that payment to SIPAC.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as the $100,000 that was allocated to you and that you didn't spend, do you have some type of a reserve fund that you put that in that gets interest or that you invested, or what do you do with that extra money?
So there's one fund. We're a small agency, so we just have one fund, the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board fee fund. Some other agencies that are larger have a separate, maybe litigation fund or some other funds for other purposes. That money will just stay in the fund if we don't spend it. A couple of years ago, starting in fiscal year 19, in an effort to reduce the balance in that fund, we lowered a number of our licensure fees by about $50 each. In an effort that over time that would draw down the balance of that fund. So we don't have a way to invest that money, but it just stays in the fund if we don't spend it.
Okay, great. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, thanks for being here. This is going to be kind of a theme for me this year for all the different institutions that come through, but Kansas, and I don't want to deviate too far from budget stuff versus policy, but in Kansas, one of the top exports is educated young people. In Johnson County, throughout the state, we know that we are graduating more mental health professionals, but they're not always staying in Kansas. And so if there's anything policy or budget besides fee funds that we can do to keep not only graduating those folks from our regent system, and I will be asking a question of the regent system for how many we are graduating, but what that looks like, and if there are recommendations that this committee or the legislature could do to keep our mental health professionals in Kansas rather than going elsewhere, I think that would be a really important discussion.
And I think I might be able to speak a little bit to that topic. We are limited by, we have a budget that really just covers our ability to license and regulate. So we don't really have additional money for things like tuition reimbursement or grants or things like that. But one of the neat things, in my testimony, I included some follow-up items. I spoke to your committee a little about a week and a half ago, so I do have some updates for you, but I also included a list of some technology and some progress or process advancements. And one of those I just want to touch upon that I think links to that just a little bit. In January of this last year, we launched a YouTube channel for our agency. We have board meetings every other month. We also have advisory committee meetings that meet on the off months. And in an effort to allow more public access to those and to spread information about the work that the BSRB does and the advisory committees, we launched that channel and we broadcast 43 meetings over the last year. And in a normal year, we generally have about 10 to 15 public attendees, and they're usually members of associations. But in the last year, our meetings have been viewed on YouTube 917 times. And so we're really excited about that. When the assistant director and I go to talk to schools and we talk to students who are getting close to graduating, we encourage them to watch those meetings, to know what's going on in their profession and to be aware of the things that are happening in Kansas, the conversations the board is having about licensure requirements. And I think the reason I bring that up in that context is because I think part of it is having more of a personal investment in what's going on in Kansas and having more connections to know, what's going on in this area here in the state. I think if you don't have those connections, potentially you could look elsewhere and you could just be looking for where can I find a job. But I think knowing more about what's going on in Kansas, I think is helpful in that area.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few outside questions. One is, can you tell me how much of your fee fund that you spend on just salaries?
So yes, in the
I just didn't see it. I'm sorry.
the current balance in our fee fund is right around $2 million right now. Now that's not total expenditures. We bring in roughly around $800,000 each year in revenue, and we tend to spend higher on paper than what we would bring in, and then over time that would draw down the balance in the fee fund. But I believe there's a page that breaks out, page 3 shows the division between how much of the total expenditures are for salaries and wages. and how much is contractual services, and then there's a small portion that goes towards commodities, and also a small portion that goes towards capital outlay. So salaries does make up the majority of our budget, and then there are some other things that we need to contract through, such as things like legal services and our payment of things like rent and other things like that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask another question? Also, you have the lesser of 10% or 100,000 of the fee revenue is for the cost of support services by other state agencies. What would those include?
Yeah, so prior to a few years back, we received services through the Attorney General's office. And a few years back, they indicated to us that we had to pay separately for those services going forward. So we have a yearly contract with the Attorney General's office for legal services that's $75,000. We also contract with the Office of Information Technology Services for computer services. We get some of our basic administrative services through the Department of Administration through a separate contract with that entity. Of course, we have an agreement for rent through another group as well. And then should we need to take cases to the higher level, we would need staff from the Office of Administrative Hearings that we would contract for those. Occasionally, if we have a real difficulty with staffing, we might contract with some staffing services to bring in individuals to come and work for the agency. So there's a number of different, but in terms of the state, the biggest contracts really are, and I forgot to mention too, we also have a licensing system that is hosted by the Office Board of Healing Arts. And so we have about a $71,000 yearly agreement with that office for our online licensure hosting platform that they take care of for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, would you like me to touch upon a few other?
Yeah, that would be great. Please go ahead.
Great. Well, I mentioned the YouTube channel, and I really do think it's been a really big success for us. In fact, this last weekend, I was invited to speak at a conference for the Federation of Associations of Regulatory Boards about public protection through creative access to information. And so that was a really exciting opportunity, and I went down there and came back up for the hearing, but really excited to kind of share what we're doing here in the state. Also, last time I spoke to your budget committee last year, I indicated we had some technology that really was getting a bit outdated. And so over this last year, we have started a phase-in approach of getting rid of some of that older computer technology and moving to desktop as a service. So we have already replaced 3 of our computers, and we're going to be doing a phase-in so that it's not a real big impact in any one particular year. You might also see, if you compare our budget from last year to this year, there's a decrease in capital outlay for computers because we're using more of those services as a leasing agreement through the state instead of purchasing them outright. Also, one of our things that we're looking at constantly is how can we license individuals faster. And we had previously used a paper system for our credit card processing, and we have converted as of October 21 to a new online licensing portal where individuals can go in and make payments automatically through our website, and they can also do electronic checks through our website as well. So anything that could even shave a week down from the licensure time, I think is really helpful, and it also provides a more secure way to do that as well. Previous to my time with the agency, there were not cell phones for any staff members. So staff members occasionally had to use their own personal equipment to do some state work, and that is something we wanted to move away from. So we did enter an agreement where the assistant director and I have cell phones for the office, and while it is a small cost, we think it's more helpful and keeps the information more secure. So we've been trying to update and upgrade those things. Additionally, we've been looking at the processes for the board this last year. The board had a previous document it had agreed to several years back, and it was called a board governance policy, and it outlined responsibilities for board members and expectations from the public, but it had not been updated since 2011. So working with the board and legal counsel, we did a major revision to that document and created 2 new documents, one that includes expectations of board members, and then also for advisory committee members, and those are posted to our website. Part of an overall agency kind of cleanup and upgrade. And then on the next page, we also, since we have launched our channel, have had additional members reach out to us with questions or want to attend our meetings. and there became a need for some guidelines for public attendees. So in working with legal counsel and the board, we developed a document we have on our website that provides guidance to public attendees. And we've received some questions from other agencies who would like to adopt something similar. So we're excited to be able to provide that as a resource. And then additionally, we have a document that shows what information gets posted on our website in terms of disciplinary matters. And we did a look into that with legal counsel's assistance, and we revised that document to provide some clearer language for the public about why things are posted and what should be posted to the website. And so we have that as a new item as well. And then I did get a number of questions last time I was before your committee. I wanted to briefly give you some updates on. One item was there was a request for a more detailed list of licenses under the BSRB. We have a tiered approach to licensure for a number of the professions. So I've included a couple of pages for you on the back end of my testimony that does break it out by level of profession. So you can see over time that while some groups have shifted back and forth, you can kind of see if there's been overall trends between the clinical level of licensure increasing or the bachelor's level or different things like that. Secondly, there was a request for a definition of professional counseling, and I did go ahead and get the technical definition, and that is from the American Counseling Association, that professional counseling is a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. And I provided a little bit information regarding the definition of professional counseling there as well. But from talking to individuals, it appears to be a person-centered focus, whereas other types of professions, such as marriage and family therapy, might be looking at relationships and groups, or addiction counseling might be looking at a specific topic, such as addictive disorders or substance use disorders. There was a request for the number of schools in Kansas that have professional counseling programs, so I provided a list of those schools in the testimony as well. There was also some questions about reports of alleged violation that we receive and what are the most common. I spoke to our investigators, and they indicated the three most popular ones that we receive right now are breaches of confidentiality, dual relationships, such as individuals getting too close to their counselors, or potentially a sexual relationship between counselors and individuals that they are treating, and then also individuals who might be practicing under an expired license. And in terms of the most common violations, we've been seeing that those individuals who practiced under an expired license or they had issues with their continuing education, dual relationships, and then also individuals quitting their positions and not providing adequate notice to the people they're serving or to their employer. And then there was
Is that written in your testimony, the violations?
That is just, it was not in my testimony.
Okay.
I just wanted to circle back.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. I wasn't missing it somewhere.
And then there's two more things that are not in the testimony, but I wanted to circle back around to. There was a request for an update on how our agency has responded to the House Bill 2066 in terms of the military licensure. We are tracking those cases, and that applies to anyone who is a military member, a military spouse, someone who is resident of Kansas, or someone who intends to reside in Kansas. And so far, from July 2021 through December of 2021, we had 35 cases where someone fit into at least one of those categories, although there are some cases where they include multiple categories there. And I can tell you that in looking at them, for most of the cases, we have been able to license them the same day that we have a completed application. Initially, there was a little bit of delay in terms of the payments being received for those licenses, but with the online portal, that has helped out with that step of it as well. And then the last thing I wanted to touch upon, when I was here, I was asked a question about, in the time that I've been with the agency, what have I learned and what might I need from the legislature to make a request? And so just briefly, I want to say that this position is difficult, but I'm committed to spending the time to do my best to do it. I also have a lot of respect for the board members who serve on our board. They are professionals who could make a lot more money doing other things, but they're being very nice to volunteer their time, and they have a sense of wanting to help others, and that's been a really powerful thing for me. I think it will take time to go ahead and continue to work on our processes and continue to learn. There's a number of different hats to wear in this position, but if I could make one request on a personal level, it would just be for some additional time to continue to work and improve these skills. And if there was something I could ask for others, I would say that I believe my staff does an amazing job. I would like some more control to be able to provide things like merit-based pay increases for them if possible, but I know that there is an interest in providing overall increases when that happens. So if that is the route the legislature would like to pursue, I would encourage them to provide some money in the budget for a pay increase, because I see how hard my staff works, and I would encourage you to help me recognize the work that they do. So I know that's a lot of information, but I'll go ahead and stop for questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and if I remember, you, last year when you came, you had just been the director for such a short time.
I believe it was
Yep.
a little less than 2 months.
Yep, okay. Well, it seems like you really have a handle on things, so.
Well, thank you. I'm working hard. So.
Yep, okay, committee, what questions? Representative Riley and then Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think several of those questions that you were answering were my questions, so I appreciate that. You just nailed it on the head right there. When I went home and had a couple forums of discussion on that we were covering this board, and again, we're just two small counties, Cali and Sumner, as far as I had two different people, and I can't tell you their computer skills or anything like that, but they kind of brought to my attention that, and again, this might have been through your transition of going to your new computer system, but they were saying that they had a hard time getting on, they had a hard time calling into your office to get questions because they weren't computer literate, and paying their bill, they didn't understand, or paying the fees. And so I'm just saying, do you think that you have that people have a hard time returning your calls or people's calls to answer questions? I know that you don't intentionally try to do that, but it just seems like this last year people out of the office, it being hard to get through. So I don't know whether that'll happen next year. I'm just saying that in my two little counties, we had two different people come to me and say that they had challenges getting on your site, finding somebody to answer the phone, to ask questions, that kind of thing. So just asking about that.
Sure. Yeah, and I can say that, when I came in, I had three main priorities. One was to make sure we're making accurate decisions. Two, we're making quick decisions when we can, and to provide good customer service. So those are the three main priorities that I wanted us to implement. It has been very challenging this year, and I appreciate the feedback. I do believe that there is more work for us to do to get better at getting back to people. For quite a while, the office was operational, but we were under an order to have limited staff at the office because we were directed to have most staff members working from home. And so for a lot of the year, we didn't have a good way for our staff members to take phone calls when they were at home. We have gained additional technology over the year to help with that. And also because of such limited staff at the office, there were periods to where we were not taking live phone calls. We were letting them, asking people to leave messages or send an email, and then we would follow up with them. Right, and I think that was a temporary thing in most part because of the direction to have staff members working from home. I think as of January, the beginning of January, we've had most staff members back in the office. And we've gone back for the ones who are not in the office full-time, we have two investigators who are doing a little bit of telework, but it's by our official policy. But I think now that everyone's back in the office, I expect those types of issues to decrease. But if you do have any particular cases that you hear about, or anyone who has an issue like that, feel free to contact me directly and I can look into it. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just missed the number of military licensees that you mentioned.
Yeah, so in that 6-month time period, we had 35 that were flagged for one of the 4 categories. Specifically for military members, I believe the number was 5 for that time period, but some of those also might have been military spouses. So with the 2066 for military members and military spouses, once we have a complete file where we can make a decision, we're asked to make a decision within 15 days. And so for those particular military members or military spouses, it was about 5 individuals who fit under that. And it's one thing that's a little confusing too. The bill, the main emphasis is on reciprocity applications. So we do have military members who are applying for initial licensure, but they kind of fit under a different category. The 2066 generally refers to individuals who are applying through reciprocity.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just as an aside, I think everyone struggled with COVID and being in the office, out of the office, not enough people, everything. So I appreciate that you were looking at it really closely, and just be glad you're not the Department of Labor.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, committee, want to draw your attention to the fact that David gave us that list, and I don't know what all these letters are, but if someone has a question, they can ask you. But then Martin also gave us a long list of the fees and what the current fee is, and also what the statutory limit is, which I think is really helpful and good information. So both of those things are really helpful. Okay, anything else? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my 2 to 5 year question would be, is there any bottleneck of people that, we have challenges with different mental health places that they're saying that they need people. So is there any bottleneck in your agency at this point of people that we need to bring to Kansas to fill those jobs that we're not filling now? Is there an openings?
I do hear feedback from facilities that are seeking additional employees. One of the areas that I do hear that is addiction counseling. And I guess this is a good opportunity for me to note that we did introduce a bill last week. It's Senate Bill 387, and it includes a piece that would make more individuals eligible to take the examination to become a licensed addiction counselor. And then we have a piece in there that should make it less restrictive for individuals seeking the clinical level for social work licenses. And then there is a piece in there that was requested by the Kansas Psychological Association to require some additional continuing education hours in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But those first 2 pieces for the addiction counselors and social work, those, if they are implemented, they would allow more individuals to get licensed quicker. So we are looking at some of those changes. Marriage and family therapy, there's a certain requirement in regulations that has to do with in-residence requirements, with how many classes they would need to take physically out of school. And they did make a recommendation for marriage and family therapy to change that to allow, or to require fewer hours physically present. So they changed their in-residence requirement, but that's sort of a different path because that'll need to go through the regulatory process. So some of those changes are going through statute and some are going through regulation. So just kind of the time frame on the 2 of them.
Okay, very good. Anything else? Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And committee, as you know, tomorrow we'll be doing the recommendations for this board. And so right now we will go ahead and move to the Kansas Board of Healing Arts. And Shirley is going to do the budget analysis for that.
Good afternoon, committee. I assume you want just a few minutes to look over the first few pages? Yes.
Okay, any questions, committee? Okay, Representative Riley, on the first 4 pages, right? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I think as I look through this budget going into the future, my comment would be just keeping on top of the amount of FTEs, because that's an indicator not only in the current budget, but, we look forward, 3 years from now, we'll look back and we'll see that that's the way it's always been, so that's why we'll keep it. And then there's, of course, the hidden costs of the healthcare, capers, all that kind of stuff that is involved with when you add additional FTEs. So that's what I fine-tune to look at right away. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Shirley, we'll jump right in then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, on page 5, we'll look at the budget request for 2022. And as Martin stated, this is a biennial agency, so we already have approved numbers for 22 and 23. So you'll notice at the top of the table, the amount that was approved by the 21 legislature was 6.6 million. And the agency did not make any changes to that amount. There is a corrected FTE position. I had, of all of my agencies, I think I had corrected FTE in every one. I don't know if this is just kind of a cleanup or redefining, but we did have some changes in numbers to make it a little more accurate. You will notice there that in my description under the agency estimate that although the total amount of the budget is the exact same number as approved, they did do some recalculating between expenditure categories. Some went up, some went down, but the total amount stayed the same. And the governor's recommendation actually adds $23,194, which is part of the governor's 24/7 pay plan. The Board of Healing Arts does have at least one personnel that fits within the description of the 24/7 pay plan. And so again, this is just a salary and wage increase for a partial year for that pay plan.
Shirley, will you give the committee just a quick explanation of the 24/7 pay plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I did not bring the analysis of the governor's program, and the acting executive director, Susan Geil, I'm hoping might be able to explain. The governor introduced a 24/7 pay plan. It's primarily for correctional officers, personnel at hospitals, personnel that dealt with COVID-type incidents and patients and activities related to COVID and the fact that they had to work longer hours. That's about as much as I am aware of.
No, that's helpful. And so what you're saying is in this board, there was one position that would have applied or would have been qualified.
And I don't know if it's one position or there's 5 positions.
There's 5 positions. Okay, but there was only an increase of 23,000, so it's just like a 20% of their salary or something. Okay. Okay. All right. Are you ready to move on to 2023? No, not yet.
There's some other
Okay, yep. Any other questions on 22?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to talk about because there aren't a lot of changes, so, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
On page 7, you've got the fiscal year 2023. Again, you have an approved budget of $6.9 million. And the agency request actually was a decrease of $300,000 below the approved amount. There are decreases in salaries and wages, commodities, capital outlay. There is a slight increase in contractual services. And the major decrease there were some computer equipment expenditures in '22 that they did not have in '23. Another FTE adjustment. And again, this is the only change is the governor added $43,000 for the 5 positions for the 24/7 pay plan.
Okay, any questions? So I do have a quick question about the FTEs. So there was, if we look at 2022, they made an adjustment down 2, which took us to 61 FTEs. And then
they decreased at 1 in '23.
But it stayed at 61 because it started at 62.
At 62. One of the things that I can talk about a little bit, and have been talking with the agency about it, is this agency also was under the bill last year where they increased the number of licensures, including military, and they had requested during omnibus an increase in salaries and wages and an FTE position because of that bill.
Okay.
And during omnibus, we added salary and wage positions and 1 FTE. When we talk about the FTE, we talk about the legislative approved numbers. And it appears that position that they requested that we provided in the legislative approved numbers has not been filled yet. And therefore, they did not count it as part of their FTE when they submitted their budget. So I believe that's one of the FTE that's been subtracted out.
Okay. Okay, if anyone has any questions, we can ask the director too, but. Okay, any other questions for Shirley?
And then on the last page, because they don't have any programs, and Susan did talk about the performance-based budget, but that's some of the information that was provided as part of the performance-based budget.
Okay. And I just wanted to point out also on page 4, there is the list of all the license fees, and again, the current and the statutory limit. So that's an interesting piece of information that Shirley included in there for us. Okay, any questions for our fiscal analyst? Okay, thank you, Shirley. And now I'll call on Susan Geil, the acting executive director. Geil or Geil? Geil, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Geil, the Acting Executive Director of the Board of Healing Arts. Thank you for having me today. I did submit some testimony earlier, short though it is. Basically, it just says we do concur with the governor's recommendations. Don't have much to add other than, much like my counterpart at the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board, I would point out that, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm screaming at you. The difference between the actuals of fiscal year 21 and the proposed for fiscal year 22 of about $500,000, similar to the things that Mr. Fy pointed out. Because of the pandemic in fiscal year 21, we did not have travel much in-state or out-of-state. Most of our board meetings were done mostly virtually. Very few folks came in person. We did not have much of our no-limit fund was spent. Our litigation cases were lower, so we didn't have many experts to pay, and that's where much of that money is spent. So that's where some of that decrease is. We definitely anticipate seeing that ramp up this year. Sorry, I can't seem to get consistency. So we're seeing that kind of trickle up this year, and so anticipate hopefully that will continue. So anticipate that that money will be spent more consistently moving forward. So with that, I will happily stand for questions at this time.
In your testimony, you mentioned the K-Tracks. Do you want to expound on that just a little bit? We had quite a discussion about it last year. So if you could speak to that a little bit, that would be helpful.
So sadly, I am not the expert on K-Tracks. My predecessor, Tucker Poling, was quite the expert on that. What I know about that is that we had put the $75,000 transfer in our budget for K-Tracks, and then that was removed actually by Division of Budget because the Attorney General's office received a grant to fund K-Tracks. And so that's why kind of comes and goes. That's why that money was removed from our budget. And of course, we are supportive of that decision.
Yes. And do you know if the grant was ongoing or how long it's going to go for?
It appears to me that Ms. Morrow has the answer to
Okay.
that.
Madam Chair, you're confusing with the Social Service Budget Committee, which has the pharmacy budget. But I also have the pharmacy budget, which does fund K-Tracks. And Ms. Giles is correct. There was a bill passed last year. The Attorney General it's part of the lawsuits, the opioid lawsuits. And they're using some of the settlement money to help fund K-Tracks. And the Board of Pharmacy gets $200,000 a year as part of a fund that was created that transfers over from the Attorney General's office.
It'll be ongoing.
Correct.
Yep.
As long as the
Right,
money's
the
coming
settlement.
in from the lawsuits.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. You said that you agreed with the governor's recommendations, but, then here on our sheet, there's a difference, like on 2023, it has an agency request of $6,587,656, and then the governor's recommendation of $6,630,727. So I'm just wondering, if you agree with the governor's recommendation, then why is there that difference there?
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
Page 7.
So the governor actually added money to our budget because of the 24/7 staff. So we are fine with that.
But then would that mean that where it says agency request is $6,587,000, I mean, does that need to be updated? That's not correct then?
Well, if I may, but surely you can also, so there's a process for how this happens, and the agency requested at a point in time this amount, and then the governor comes in with her budget, and she can concur or she can increase or decrease, and that's that amount. And the agency doesn't go back and say, oh, we're changing ours, because that was a point in time where they submitted what they were asking for. And then the governor changes it, and then we come in and say, and I think you're just saying the governor changed it and we're okay that they changed it. It's not an official, we're asking for something different.
Right.
We're just fine.
We're certainly not appealing the governor's decision. We're concurring with the governor's change that she made. The 24/7 staffing salary increase happened after we submitted our budget request. We did not know about that when we submitted our request, or we certainly would have added that money into our request. So you're exactly right. It's a point in time.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what our job is to look at what they requested, and then with the governor, we can make adjustments and recommendations in this committee. And then Shirley, you had a comment.
Well, the only other thing I would comment on 2023, you'll notice the very top number, which is what the legislative approved number from last year is. The agency actually has come in and said, we don't need that much money. You can cut $300,000 from what because when they did their initial 2023, they did it 2 years prior to 2023, so it was a very rough estimate. So then they've refined their estimate lower. And then the governor said, well, yes, you don't need the $300,000, but we're going to add the pay plan in. So it's actually quite a bit lower than what the original number was.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically the same question that I asked the previous director. So previous Secretary of Commerce said that there's 65,000 professional jobs that are open in the state of Kansas. And so I guess question A for you would be, is there something that we can do, that you can do, to bring more people from out of state or from colleges in state to fill those openings, you know, specifically in your area? And I guess part B, and it's such a small part, I mean, is there something that we can do to make our fees, make your fees less that would have some impact on that? Or do we have some kind of a bottleneck in your agency that we can open up to get more people into the state of Kansas? Okay. Thank you.
Sure. There's a couple things that are happening right now, specifically in response to the pandemic. We have an emergency temporary license, which is free. Those are being issued right now within about 3 business days. Recently, there was a bill passed, or there's a bill passed that allows for an out-of-state waiver. So if someone who is licensed in good standing in another state wishes to practice in Kansas, specifically to help mitigate COVID-19 issues, they can come into Kansas and start practicing immediately. They just have to notify us within 7 days, and there's no fee for that. We are currently issuing licenses within about 7 to 10 business days from a complete application. So I think we're working really hard to try to streamline processes. We're looking at each of our license types to make sure that everything that we are requiring for a license type is logical and reasonable, unless of course it's statutorily required. And then if we find that, we really don't need this, it's really not necessary, then we're changing our processes and procedures accordingly. Had something else I was going to say. As far as our fees go, we are fully fee funded, and we need really, I think, every penny that we're getting to make sure that we can be competitive in the workplace. As far as keeping people in the state, we have an education and outreach committee, which was started a couple years ago, and they're doing a really nice job of going to many of the licensing or the educational programs and talking about the licensing process so that folks have a really good idea of what we need from them from the get-go, so that we are getting more complete applications right from the jump, instead of, they don't really know what we need, so they're sort of piecemealing those applications in. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from the professional organizations that those presentations are really helpful to the students that are hearing them.
So do you think that temporary licensures that you're doing now will continue on with those out-of-state people? Do you see that that's been a positive outlook, a positive thing, and that we will continue to keep those people in Kansas? So, and I guess the second thing is, have you shared with the other directors the way that you're going out and making an outreach to some of the colleges with your different licenses and how to get those licenses? Have you shared that with some of the other directors so that they can use that part of their programs?
So some of those emergency temporary licenses do have expirations on them statutorily, but that's certainly, and some of our professions do have temporary licenses as part of their licensing process, but that's certainly something we can continue to look at down the road as we move forward. And as far as sharing with the directors, I have not, since I've been in this role, I am not certain what Director Poling had done before. I would imagine that he likely did, because he was pretty transparent about anything positive that we had, well, about lots of things, but specifically about the positive things that we did. So I would guess that was shared, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Okay, so committee, again, be thinking, we will do our recommendations tomorrow with these two. And then, oh yes, at your place, or are they at the place or in the drawer? They're at your places are last year's folders. You need to either, if you had one that was in the drawer, it's at your place. You need to either take it to your office, or if you don't, it will be thrown away from last. So if you want to keep anything from last year, just leave it here and we'll throw it away. Or sorry, if you want to keep it, take it with you. Otherwise, we'll leave it. And then we have new folders for this year that Diane made everybody. So we appreciate that. Thank you. She did. Okay, Shirley, did you have an announcement? Yeah.
Well, also I had mentioned a couple of days ago, the report out procedure as far as signing the subcommittee reports. You have that at your desk. Please read it. And if you have any questions, let us know so we can answer those. Because once we start getting recommendations tomorrow, these procedures will start. And one of the things that we just have to be very careful with, we will send out the email to the committee with you blind copied so that you cannot reply all. We need to be very careful that we don't make any
Fractions of the Open Meetings Act.
Yes, the Open Meetings Act, that we're not communicating via email with the majority of the committee.
Okay, and Shirley, tomorrow, will you just give us a little preview of what we'll do tomorrow?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we want to look for in the recommendations is you're making a recommendation for both fiscal year 22 and 23. They can be in one recommendation, or they can be in two separate recommendations. There can be one for 22 and one for 23, but we do need both those years in the recommendations. We start with the governor's recommendation. So the simplest recommendation, which would make no changes whatsoever to the current governors, would be, I recommend we do the governor's recommendation in 22 and 23 for healing arts. That would be, in essence, you're not making any changes. You can add money, you can delete money, you can add language, you can delete language, you can add a comment, a commemoration, or we don't think this agency's doing what they should be doing. We want them to change what they're doing. So those are some of the things to think about.
And the comments would be something that someone brings forward as a motion, and then we talk about and vote on as a committee.
And as a committee, the chair is responsible for saying, do you want it voted on, or do you want consensus? I mean, how are you going to do the recommendations?
Okay. All right. And as far as the comments, does it include everything? I mean, are there any parameters for the comments?
Now, when you say comment, a comment would be an amendment to the subcommittee report. Your recommendations could be anything. So and I'm just trying to make sure you're not saying your comment is the recommendation, because those are kind of two different things.
No, something extra.
Yeah.
Okay, so the recommendation is what we decide to do with the budget specifically.
And our language that we put in the subcommittee report states, the House Higher Education Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation with the following adjustments. Now, if you go with the governor's recommendation, we will just say the House Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation. But then if you have adjustments, we'd list those, number 1. Number 2, whatever adjustments you want to make to the governor's recommendation.
And those adjustments would be financial. Those would be part of the budget, or
the comments,
we take away.
Comments aren't part of the budget.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Comments
Comments are not, The only committees that can make comments in the budget process are these committees, budget committees and subcommittees. They don't do those in full committee in House Appropriations or Senate Ways and Means. This is your opportunity if you want to commemorate somebody, if you want to say, yes, we think they're doing a wonderful job, or no, we think they should do something better. It doesn't go any farther. It doesn't go into the bill. It doesn't.
Okay.
It's just, we want to let the agency know this.
Okay. Good, everyone.
Okay. A minority report is a separate piece of paper attached to the back of the subcommittee report. It's on white. The subcommittee reports will be blue and yellow for the different years. It will say at the top, I do not, and I didn't bring them with me this time, I do not concur with the actions from the committee for the following reasons. And then you can write it, or you can tell me what you want written up, and myself or Martin or whoever the analyst is can write it up, show it to you, and then you sign it. And it gets attached to the report, and the chair will present it to the committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Shirley. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.